The way you fight is the way you have sex. Yeah. Just saying. Both, when done well, are deeply vulnerable and deeply connecting.
Hello, beautiful. Welcome to Aesthetic Influencers, where we explore the world of medical aesthetics and the relationship between inner and outer beauty. We're on a mission to empower 1 million women a day to level up their look and their life through the Bianca lifestyle of beauty, intelligent decision-making, attractiveness, and noble character attributes. I'm your host, Marco Emilio Valle, and you're gonna love today's show.
What practical step can a person begin with as they want to gain more awareness about their past history and the influences that have shaped their decision-making with regard to aesthetics, cosmetics, anti-aging?
I think a simple first step, there's many steps, but a good step is, what am I doing or not doing? I go get an aesthetic procedure, but I don't tell anyone, including my nanny, where I'm going. I just have an appointment.
Yeah.
It's a doctor's appointment. It's coffee with a friend. I'm lying. So paying attention to what you're doing and not doing, and I think you start feeling any tension or dissonance, shame, anxiety. My head says I value this and it's good, but my felt sense doesn't match that. And then I think just getting curious about it. That curiosity, what am I doing and not doing, and then what's the felt sense of that for me? We don't have the answers, we haven't arrived, but just, can I be curious about those things, what I'm doing behaviorally, how I'm feeling it, the felt sense of that, which I think is a good place to start in this process of engaging.
Yeah, we're meaning-making creatures. And so the noticing, when did this come up for me? What was happening in that moment? When do I think about this? You know, when do I think again about wanting to go get the nose job or the Botox, or asking yourself, what's the purpose of this? Like, what is it going to do for me? And then sitting with that for a while. I think some people are just fine rattling off an answer and don't do the work of getting in touch with the feelings that are, you know, kind of swirling around that, if you will. There are, for some people, these procedures are truly coming from what we would call a grounded, healthy, and for some people, these procedures are motivated by pain, insecurities, and they're really coping with these procedures, which I would argue is not the purpose of them. Really, when you use any coping skill for too long and never deal with what is causing the pain, you know, this is where some of the addiction model comes from. Your tolerance builds up. It's never enough. I'm going to go get more. That can apply to any behavior, any substance, any dynamic. And so you just keep having to up the ante and the impact factor because you've never dealt with what's underneath, which is painful. That could be everything from your classic trauma that people have kind of a grid for, but it could also be like living a life of negative messages saying that you had to have things done in order to be enough. There are people who could come in and do the deep work and reprocess that pain and may still choose to have a procedure. So I am not arguing that the outcome is you would no longer do it. What I would love is for people to deal with the pain or the messages and come to a place of grounded health. And then they're going to feel really confident about their decision. They're not going to care what anybody thinks about it. And they're not going to feel like they have to lie about it. They're not going to feel, you know, privacy is one thing, but like I am going out of my way to lie about this because I really don't feel good about it, is what that tells me. My deepest desire for people is to be able to make decisions with confidence because they've dealt with their pain, whatever that is.
Let's take a moment then to drill down into a particular example that I think for many people is very uncomfortable, which is why there's so much joking about it on social media, and that is the lying of getting procedures to spouses and significant others.
Back to a conversation that Jenna started earlier about just the deceit and the lying in general. And so this is just a symptomatic version of that. So I'm going to lie to my spouse.
Yeah,
That's concerning to me for that relationship.
me too.
The relationship with self, the relationship with the spouse.
I'm just curious at what that does over time.
It feels very
Relationally.
corrosive.
Yeah. And I believe in having, levels of privacy within, relationships and marriages. So like, I'm not saying that. I don't think you are either. It's less about the procedure for me than it is about the deceit.
But is there a place to say, I am an individual, whether I am in a committed relationship or a marriage relationship, and this is something that's important to me. It affects my level of confidence, how I interface with the world and how others interface with me. If you understood my partner or my spouse, you would understand why I choose to get these procedures and treatments and keep them from them.
I think there's probably a context driving it, as we were talking about before. And then I'm returning into that context and we can't have an open dialogue. The freedom to have the conversation, not so much the judgment that you don't. And I'm hearing in that example, there lacks some freedom. Like there's this pressure or fear about what would happen if I talked about it. It doesn't feel like a groundedness in choosing to just be private because we don't have to talk about those things. We're synced up. If it came up, it came up. I just don't initiate it, right? It's not this, I'm trying really hard to protect myself.
Jenna, I think a very common scenario is my significant other is against aesthetic or cosmetic procedures because they do not want me to change how I look, right? Or to paraphrase, they don't want me to look fake.
Okay, yeah, I heard that.
They're telling me they love me for who I am, beside the point of however much makeup this person uses or how they take care of their physical fitness and wellness. And therefore, I'm going to do this in secret, or I have done this in secret, and when I revealed myself to them, they either didn't notice what I had done or they loved it. Very common scenario, I would say.
I get concerned about what's happening in the relationship where it's really not about this procedure. You have two unique people who are coming at a decision based on value systems that don't line up. And this does happen a lot in the context of couples and marriages because we typically get together because we have a lot of things we do agree on. I mean, there's some exceptions to that, but like that's sort of why we marry each other or couple up is, hey, there's this much overlap between us, and so we're going to join on that. And so when there is some difference that crosses the intensity level where your discomfort is. So, this is a deeply held value for me, or I have really charged emotions about this. That may be true for one or both, and we're in disagreement. What do we do with that? Because we are still two different people. The imagery I like to use is we are separate, but we have chosen to be tethered to each other. So your choices impact me, and my choices impact you. And I didn't lose my personhood, my voice, or my agency, and yet we impact each other. And this is what we're talking about. And it's really not about the procedure. It's about the fact that they haven't figured out how to negotiate that. So your question is asking about, well, you didn't use this word, but this is what I heard. Boundaries. It's my body. I'm going to make a decision. This is my discretionary money. I'm going to go spend it on this. Why do you have an issue with it? I think that there's a difference between, do I have the right to do this without someone's permission? Now, I'm going to pause right there and say there are a lot of cultural influences that actually would bump up against like permission asking. And so we're not going to unpack all those, but there are different subcultures and pockets where permission would have to be given depending, it could be a gender thing, it could be just a partnership thing, it could be a business thing. So lots of things. We're going to put that on the shelf and not unpack it. But even if I don't have to ask permission, to not acknowledge that the person that I want to share my life and my soul with is going to experience my decisions.
Which is the hopeful, I would say, ideal goal in relationship, is that I hold on to myself while realizing that I'm impacting the other. I can hear the systemic rules
Yep.
that are, I will lose myself if we have this conversation because we do not agree. Or agreement is the goal. We're never going to get there because we're so different.
So we'll just opt out of having it at all.
Let's just opt out and just keep lying to ourselves.
Not vulnerable, not intimate.
Not vulnerable, not intimate. As a sex therapist, I've also got questions about that part of their life, because if we're lying here about our bodies,
The way you
probably-
fight is the way you have sex.
Yeah.
Just saying. Both, when done well, are deeply vulnerable and deeply connecting.
Whereas the dynamic that I hear you articulating is that you are making your decisions really based on fear,
I do hear a lot of fear about the process. I do.
right? My significant other is afraid of what this is going to do to my appearance that he says he loves and enjoys. I am afraid of losing myself, my voice, my independence. So now we're just going to operate to some level of
Separateness.
separateness.
That's where like the sadness and the grief comes up for me, is someone, I guess the person who's hiding it, because the other person doesn't know. He doesn't even know what he likes in your scenario, right? He's like, but he loves you the way that you are. I already got the Botox. He just doesn't know it. He doesn't know what he loves. Like there's so much there, you know? And, or maybe she hasn't done it yet. The context of their relationships and the habits and the dynamics is that if we hit up against something, and again, it could be anything, it doesn't have to be medical procedures, that's just what we're talking about here. She's gonna opt away from intimacy to deal with the dilemma rather than opting in. And I think that that's a slippery slope. I mean, maybe that'll just be the one little pocket. I don't know. I'm not a fortune teller. I just don't see that. I think it's a slippery slope where you now start opting away from connection and opting away from intimacy when we are avoiding the difficult and hard things in our relationships. I'm sad for the relationship more than anything. It's not about the Botox or the procedure.
What advice then would you give to the woman who is right now wrestling through this issue?
Yeah.
Their significant other has already stated, maybe categorically, maybe a number of times, that they don't want them to get anything. And we're talking a lot about Botox, but it could be any number of hyaluronic acid fillers, it could be body sculpting, it could be a number of things.
Sure.
What advice or maybe what steps might you recommend to them in order to protect not only their own personal freedom and individuality, but also this relationship, and to also honor that other individual who is a part of this relationship?
I would say, because there's the great potential that there's a story she's telling herself that may not be true about the other. So I would be curious and encourage her to go to him or them and say, hey, this is what it feels like to me. This is what it sounds like to me. You said, I love you the way you are. Don't go get that procedure. Here's what I'm experiencing. Because sometimes, not always, sometimes the partner comes back and says, oh, I'd be great with you doing that treatment. I just love you the way you are. I don't want you to feel like you have to.
I just didn't want you to think I was against you.
And
you
they've
were
been
forced.
operating under a story they've told themselves because I heard you say something and that may never have been what they said.
Intended, yeah.
Now, if it was, then I would encourage them, lean in a little bit more. That's scary to me. That makes me mad. I start wanting to protect myself and hide and lie because I hear you say that. And I think we've got some work to hash out here. That's what I would encourage them to go and be curious. Hey, we had a conversation 2 weeks ago and I said, oh, I'd love my lips to look like that. I'd love to go do that. And I've heard this is how you do it. And you said this back to me and here's what it felt like to me. Can we have a conversation? What does that mean to you? Here's what it sounded like to me.
Yeah.
I think that's a powerful starting place.
Yeah, like start by testing your assumptions and make sure, because we make a lot of misattributions in meaning to the behaviors or the words that someone has said to us that, again, communication breakdowns are just really rampant, if you hadn't noticed. If you do that and you are still hitting a wall, then I would say get help. Find a relationship or intimacy coach, find a therapist or a counselor. They're not all created equal. I'm going to say that. And so find a good one, because it's not about the issue. It's now about the dynamic. And I would just want for her and them to actually gain one of the greatest skills that they get to use for the rest of their lives. Not even just with each other. Like, they're going to take that into their work relationships and other dynamics in family, and they're going to be so empowered to flourish in the context of the other. And I mean, the way we would do it is they're going to gain a ton of intimacy if they're willing to do the work. I would say it's a bit of a litmus test that there's probably not as much intimacy as what they could have. We sometimes need to be in the space with a couple figuring this out, because we need to play the heavy. We need to be the bad guy. You don't have to be the bad guy. When you have a professional, it's like, hey, whoa. You know, we catch the words that aren't packaged very well, and we work with that person, and then we go, okay, now you ready? Now send it back to them. And I wish people could observe therapy, because it's so fun at times. We will teach you to fish, not just give you one, okay? And I want that for more people in the world. So I would say test your assumptions. I totally agree with that, because we tell ourselves stories that are not always accurate. And then if you really are bumping up against a wall, go get some help. I want people to know that that's out there. It is possible, and it's beautiful work.
What's your biggest takeaway from this conversation? And what topic are you dying for us to cover next? Comment below, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And tell a friend. Together, we'll grow this channel and the Bianca movement. We'll see you next time here at the intersection of inner and outer beauty.